So what I want to talk to you guys about today is how mobile device maps may be influencing cultural perceptions of space and geographic knowledges. And specifically, what I mean is the emphasis of structuring mobile maps around business and location-based advertising, and if that's impacting what users notice about geographical points of interest in their everyday lives. These questions came out of kind of an unintentional side effect of some other cartographic research I was doing a few years ago. And I'm going to start by sharing that work. It's actually out in the most recent issue of Cartographic Perspectives. And from there, I want to present some of my ideas on doing a more dedicated study and solicit whatever suggestions you've got for how we could better design that research. Research on how people situate themselves and navigate has interested geographers for decades. And recently, there have been a couple of studies that have come out that attempted to compare how location-based services perform compared to users using paper-based maps and navigation into practice. This research tends to conceptualize space in terms of spatial knowledge acquisition, a set of data in the environment to be learned and correctly picked out or not. This is usually tested in terms of directional error, time required, noting landmarks, noting path connectivity, and often using sketch maps. And the thing is, mobile devices are not performed very well in many of these comparative research studies. Most famously, Ishikawa found that compared to paper maps, research subjects using mobile device maps spent more time navigating, went further, took more wrong turns, and had larger amounts of direction error, and understandably found this to be a much more frustrating process than people using paper maps on a similar course. And some of this, no doubt, comes down to familiarity. These are some of the phones that they were using at the time. This is 11 years ago. People were not particularly familiar with navigating on mobile devices at the time, and frankly, those look really frustrating to use to me too. But there may be some other things going on here. Another factor that we need to consider is that it's well known that mobile devices will tend to encourage passive reception when we get our turn-by-turn directions in driving or walking around or something like that. And that allows users to switch off, to disregard their surroundings. And Willis finds that this is, quote, a more fragmented and regionalized knowledge representation based on strong connections between locally clustered landmarks. So we have a tendency to conceptualize space in terms of landmarks, rather than a schematic network of connections between locations. Moreover, Fabrikant has found that this tendency may be exacerbated by Fabrikant's findings that people tend to ignore task-relevant information unless it's visually salient on the map itself. So, if landmarks are very important for geographical practice, and what makes for a good landmark? Classically, a landmark is going to be easily identifiable as a point reference, and people have tried to codify exactly what that means, and based on visual novelty, cognitive meaning, or cultural or historic importance. And that spatio-structural centrality or connectedness, kind of the topological connectivity within our navigation. However, these works give relatively little attention to how or why something becomes a landmark, how it accrues or loses cultural meaning, and their insalience as a point of reference when navigating. If something is based if something is based on is a landmark because of its formal qualities, how does it become so? I propose the best way to, getting ahead of myself, the best way to approach these kind of questions is to approach users in the context of their everyday lives. And it's from this context I first noticed something funny going on. I was doing a study on perceptions of cartographic scale, and I noticed a repeated use of a single point of reference when respondents were talking about how they knew where they were. I was conducting 13 focus groups at Bloomsburg University, totaling 62 participants, all of whom were college students at BU. And we were asking students to locate the library on a map application of their choice on their own phone or mobile device. And we followed up by asking them questions like, how did you go about finding the library? If you located it, what makes you think you found the right place? While videotaping, audio recording, and all of that fun stuff. And we asked about a familiar place because we wanted the participants to demonstrate their existing geographic knowledges through the use of their phone. In line with the literature, the respondents were very much focused on landmarks. 74% of the participants mentioned a landmark, for example. 56% also mentioned some kind of connectivity or spatial arrangement of campus, and so some did both. Obviously, the most commonly referenced landmark in the question was the library. That was the location that we asked about. But the second most commonly referenced landmark was Starbucks. 24% of the participants in 9 of the 13 focus groups referred to Starbucks, making it by far the most commonly referenced landmark in the study outside of the library itself. This is more than all of the other features combined, aside from the library. And it also comes up repeatedly in the participant statements. Usually as a way to confirm how they're situating themselves when they're looking at the map. So, quote, even though it doesn't say library, but I see Starbucks symbol for it being inside the library, so that's how I know where the library would be, even as the Starbucks isn't actually inside the library. Or one participant used Starbucks as the initial search query to find the library rather than searching for the library or visually panning. And in a couple of cases, Starbucks was such a strong point of reference that participants found the other Starbucks on campus and identified that as the library erroneously because they saw the location and thought that was it. So, when we consider the social economic context of Google Maps, which was by far the most commonly used mobile map in the study, similar patterns in other services, but it was so preponderant. It was by far the leading, most commonly used one. This isn't hugely surprising. Google structures its map applications to serve its greater business model of targeted advertising. And previous research has showed the extent to which the structure of features, place marks, and points of interest in web map platforms emphasizes businesses that do or could advertise on the platform. Moreover, increasing the total amount of usable online information increases the amount of data available, commercially available to use in targeted advertising. There's Google's broader business plan here of grow the internet so there's more information with which they can target you for advertising. And after I completed the study, of course, they started actually placing advertisement place marks in the map itself. And in turn-by-turn directions. So it seems safe to assume that branded locations have served as landmarks for a very long time as we take a turn at the McDonald's or the drive-thru or whatever. But these results may begin to indicate that landmarks are important to users to situate themselves not just as they're navigating, but as they're using the maps. And maps are informing some of those knowledges. So they, potentially impacted by the business strategies of the people who are publishing the maps. And that would be interesting, not just in terms of wayfinding. That would be very interesting. It's not something the wayfinding literature has gotten into very much. But I'll be the first to admit that the evidence I'm presenting here based on one point in one study is a bit thin. So, I'm in the process of developing and designing a more dedicated study to engage this question. This wasn't what I was originally looking for, but it seems productive enough to do a follow-up study focused on it. And so I'd like to present some of my ideas, and I would very much love to get your feedback on how we could improve this. So the site would be my new academic home, Hofstra University. A couple of benefits. It's a new and different site. It's walkable. It has lots of different kinds of landmarks, both business and non-business, that could serve as points of reference. Again, I would recruit students, but this time probably first years early in their first year, so they're a little less familiar with the area. And whether to use focus groups or whether to use individualized interviews, that I'm still trying to evaluate. And in terms of the process of looking at doing something along the lines of having the participants draw a mental sketch map of places they go in their immediate vicinity, go on campus. Hofstra is a mixture of both commuter and residential students. And some of the nodes and landmarks that they use to navigate themselves. And as they go about doing that, having them explain as they're drawing the map, talking about what they're putting on, why, what that means to them. And then follow that up with a second or third phase in which I have them pull out their phone and talk about and do some sort of navigational task and see if the same landmarks that showed up on the sketch maps are showing up as the things that they refer to in the phone or when they use the phone. Alternatively, I'm also considering about whether we'd ask them to do the same task, one and then the other, or have two different groups. In either case, I would welcome any feedback or suggestions you've got. This is very much something still under development. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you to all the people who've helped me along the way at different stages of this research process.